You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the economics correspondent at the Spectator, Kate Andrews, and the political editor at the HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Mail leads with the news that a body has been found by police searching for Nicola Bulley, less than a mile from where she vanished. The Times says divers were deployed to an outcrop of trees and reeds in the River Wye after two walkers called the police. The Eye also leads with the body being found in the river near where the mum of two went missing. It's also on the front of the Metro, which reports the 45-year-old's family are being comforted. The Financial Times reports that Poland's president is calling on NATO to give Ukraine post-war security guarantees just prior to the US president's visit to Warsaw this week. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Kate Andrews and Kevin Schofield. Thank you both for taking us through the papers. Let's start with the Metro and, very sad story following on from the story of Nicola Bulley going missing. A body has been found this evening in the River Wye. Kate.
As you say, a very sad story already is potentially taking an even more upsetting twist. The body of a woman has been found about roughly a half a mile from where Nicola Bulley is thought to have gone missing. It's the body of a woman. It should be stressed that it's not yet identified, but there are reports in the papers going into tomorrow that the family is being comforted to prepare for the possibility that it is Nicola. There's, again, a lot of backlash and criticism about police handling of the situation so far. Questions already as to how this has gone overlooked. It sounds like there was a call from walkers who stumbled upon what appeared to be a woman's body, potentially how this went missing, and what has been a very wide-reaching search so far. So there's still plenty of questions on the table, but that original theory that perhaps she fell into the river or ended up in the river seems to be gaining some traction this evening as this body has been found.
Yes, and Kevin, the Metro reporting that the police force is now likely to face even more questions over why her body wasn't found despite repeated searches in the river.
Yeah, exactly. It's over 3 weeks now since Nicola Bulley went missing. There's obviously been extensive searches going on in the area. The police very quickly said that they suspected that she may have gone into the water. So you wonder exactly how the body, it's taken so long for a body to be found. As Kate just said there, no, it's not been confirmed yet that it is Nicola Bulley, but certainly the police are already under a lot of pressure for the way that they've conducted this investigation, and this could potentially lead to further questions. But at the end of the day, your thoughts just go out to her family. It's been a traumatic few weeks for them. They've been in the eye of a media storm, really, and it's just been heart-wrenching to follow it. And yeah, it looks as though it's going to come to a particularly sad ending.
Yes, the Home Secretary in the Eye being quoted as saying that this development is heartbreaking. That's the quote. Although it has to be said, Kate, that there has not been a formal identification at this point.
Yeah, that's really important to stress. These details, a lot of them are yet to be confirmed, and so we don't want to jump to any conclusion. But almost regardless of what that finds, a family and two children are still missing their mother, and they are preparing for the worst as this situation develops. And as Kevin points out, they've had to deal with some horrible things over the past few weeks. Of course, even putting aside the fact that their mother has gone missing, they've had to deal with the police sharing very personal details about Nicola Bulley and the potential status of her mental health, which, as far as we can tell so far, really should not have been put into the public domain. There's no particular reason to do that. This is already a tragic case. And those suggestions almost seem like it was a bit of a cover-up for why the police were taking so long and put the emphasis back on Nicola and her family. And again, tonight there are going to be questions as to why the police have taken so long to find this body, which is not confirmed yet, but it's still a very bad sign that it wasn't uncovered to begin with. So, there's going to be a lot of emphasis on the police, and our hearts just have to go out to the Bully family at this time as they wait for further news.
Yes, Kevin, as Kate says, the force highly criticised over releasing into the public domain those personal details. The Prime Minister was concerned about that information being in the public domain, as was the Home Secretary.
Yeah, that's right. It's become a political story as well. I think Keir Starmer also expressed concern about those details being released into the public domain. It was a surprise. Certainly, it struck me as quite unusual. Now, there have been suggestions that the family were aware that this was going to happen, and that slightly puts a different gloss on it. But regardless, it has been obviously a traumatic experience for the family, and for these personal details to be released would have been particularly unpleasant as well. So, once the investigation or once the investigation reaches a conclusion, I think there will be serious questions still to be answered by the police force as to how they have conducted themselves and conducted this inquiry. They've obviously come under a lot of scrutiny. In fact, as you say, that the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister have both raised concerns about how they've gone about their business, means that I think this will rumble on for quite some time. Indeed.
Let's move on to some politics, and this being the post-Brexit trade deal with Northern Ireland, accusations that Boris Johnson is trying to scupper Rishi Sunak's attempts at reaching a deal. Let's have a look at the Metro to start with on that story. Kate.
So we have two recent former prime ministers in the Conservative Party who both perhaps feel in their own ways that they were ousted too soon. I'm, of course, speaking about Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. And we had the big Liz Truss intervention just a few weeks ago when she was talking about why she still thinks her plan for growth is the right one. And going into tomorrow, we have Boris Johnson warning that if Rishi Sunak were to make changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol bill that he, quote, masterminded, that could be a real detriment to the Brexit that he secured. Now, this really brings us back to the politics of Brexit. But, there has been pretty universal recognition that the Northern Ireland Protocol has not been working as was once hoped, the way that Boris Johnson secured it, that having to check goods between Great Britain and Northern Ireland has really had a detrimental impact on the residents of Northern Ireland. And Boris Johnson proposed this bill, and the idea behind it was that actually the UK would be able to chip away at parts of the protocol that weren't working. Rishi Sunak has been hoping to avoid that. He wants to come to a new deal, a better compromise with Brussels. And the idea behind it is that fewer, if any, goods would need to be checked, but perhaps the European Court of Justice would still have a role to play. And that's a tough thing to argue with some Brexiteers. But it's interesting, going into Monday, you have the Times reporting that Rishi Sunak is ready to push ahead. You have the Telegraph saying that he's putting this on pause. There's clearly a lot of confusion over what's going to happen with something that Rishi Sunak wanted to report on as early as this week. But there's no doubt that whatever he's trying to secure is going to cause problems within the Tory party. And it does seem now that Boris Johnson in particular is perhaps ready to have that battle with the current Prime Minister.
Yes, indeed. And Cabinet Minister Penny Mordaunt on Sophie Ridge on Sunday described Boris Johnson's intervention as not completely unhelpful. That was her description this morning. What say you, Kevin?
I think perhaps you're trying to kill Boris Johnson with kindness there. He made this intervention to be as unhelpful as possible. He clearly is not a big fan of Rishi Sunak. Him and his supporters blame Rishi Sunak for beginning the process which ultimately brought down Boris Johnson, and he would dearly love to replace him again as Prime Minister. And he sees this issue of Brexit as something that he can use to undermine Rishi Sunak. I think what Penny Mordaunt was trying to do was trying to sort of dismiss the significance of what Boris Johnson was saying. You can understand when she's going out to bat for the government. It's not a particularly pleasant experience sometimes when you're having to deal with negative stories like this. But yeah, there's no doubt that it is unhelpful for Rishi Sunak. He doesn't need Boris Johnson on his case, as well as the DUP and the other Brexiteers, the ERG group of Conservative MPs. As Kate said, last week, towards the end of last week, the noises were particularly optimistic about this deal. And there was talk about it being introduced to Parliament tomorrow, a debate and a vote on Tuesday. It's looking as though that may well slip a little bit. I still think that something will be agreed this week, but then that's only half the battle. As I said, he's hoping to get the DUP on board so that they will go back into, or they will enter into a power sharing agreement, get Stormont up and running again alongside Sinn Féin. And there's, as I say, these ERG members who are also very keen that sovereignty is their sort of key watchword as far as the Brexit deal is concerned. Anything which allows the European Court of Justice to still have some kind of say in the affairs of Northern Ireland, I think would go down particularly badly with them. So it's a really difficult balancing act that the Prime Minister has got. He will present a deal, but we'll just see how it goes down. And as we say, Boris Johnson is always willing to be as unhelpful as possible.
Just along from the pictured Boris Johnson and Penny Mordaunt is Sir Keir Starmer, and the story there I just want to drop in quickly. The Labour leader's urging SNP voters to put their faith in his party in the wake of Nicola Sturgeon's resignation. What do you think his chances are of that happening, Kate?
Look, I think this is the best shot Labour's had in Scotland for quite some time. Nicola Sturgeon, regardless of what you think of her politics, was a real political force to be reckoned with. And there's a sense that the SNP might lose some of their support and some of their focus. And that her resignation was almost an admission, not quite, but almost an admission that the current fight for independence is not going in the direction that the SNP want. And then, of course, if you look at the SNP's record on their domestic issues, especially around the NHS and education, there's a lot of room for another party to come in and say, put your faith in us. And for so long, it was the Conservatives that were providing that opposition. Labour would have a big way to jump in Scotland, but they see this as their opportunity. And, there's an understandable reason to think that Keir Starmer thinks this is his moment to make the pitch.
Kevin, Sir Keir Starmer saying that the road to electoral success must run through Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, historically, if you look at it, any time that Labour have formed a government at Westminster, they have also sent down very many Labour MPs from Scotland. Right now, they've only got one. So clearly, if they get even a dozen, say, for argument's sake, that would make things a little bit easier for them. They wouldn't have to win quite so many seats in England in order to form the next government. But, losing Nicola Sturgeon is one thing. I think a lot hinges on who she is replaced with and the appeal that person has. But, a lot of Labour supporters in Scotland switched to the SNP in the wake of the independence referendum in 2014. It's not a given that they will just suddenly switch back, or a good number of them will switch back just because Nicola Sturgeon has departed the scene. So Labour have still got a lot of work to do, but certainly, as Kate says, they're in a much stronger position in Scotland now than they have been for many, many years.
Interesting. Kevin and Kate, for the moment, thank you. We are going to take a break, but coming up, we'll take a look at the front of the Financial Times. Its headline, Poland calls for NATO to guarantee Ukraine's security after end of war. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, the economics correspondent at The Spectator, Kate Andrews, and the political editor at HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. Welcome back to both of you. Let us have a look at the Financial Times and this story about Poland's intervention in the war in Ukraine. They're saying that NATO needs to give Ukraine post-war security. And this is the president of Poland, Duda, ahead of a visit by Joe Biden to Warsaw. Kate, take us into this story.
So this story comes ahead of, as you say, President Joe Biden's visit to Warsaw this week to recognize the first-year anniversary of Russia's invasion against Ukraine. most recent one, I should say. And Poland's leader, President Duda, is calling on Joe Biden to commit to essentially a security guarantee. There's wide understanding that Ukraine cannot join NATO at this time, but essentially that there would be an extension and a different structure to the agreement in which if Russia were to keep attacking Ukraine or attack Ukraine in the future, that the US and other countries such as France would sign up to support them militarily and to give them weapons and to give them support. Now, something like this has actually been played down in the Munich Security Conference over the weekend by the US, by German officials, according to the FT, that, arguing that they don't want to preempt anything and arguably are trying to de-escalate a little bit to see where more areas of compromise might be found. But the idea here is that President Duda really wants Joe Biden to reaffirm that NATO's Article 5 and the US's commitment to it, that one attack on a NATO country is an attack on them all. Surely Joe Biden is not going to hesitate to do that. The question is whether or not he would then extend and say that Ukraine would have this special structure in which NATO countries would come to its defense as well. He might be fearful that that could escalate the situation.
Yes, we read that some NATO nations are remaining wary of binding promises, that being for fear of being dragged into a war with Russia, and instead they're arguing for strengthening Ukraine's military instead to ensure that they can defend themselves.
Yeah, which is obviously what is going on right now. Some countries are more enthusiastic about it than others, as we know. But yeah, I mean, this, as Kate says, the story makes clear that there is an acceptance that Ukraine can't be a full member of NATO, at least not at this particular moment in time. But this would give them a special status, effectively, whereby in future they would be given the protection of NATO without being a fully fledged NATO country. Now, obviously, this comes at a very a difficult time right now. Clearly, the support has been given to Ukraine to help them fight Russia, but at the same time, there's a wariness among Western countries that they don't want to escalate tensions and provoke Russia even further. But I think it'll be quite difficult, really, for the West to reject this particular suggestion. I think at the moment that it would effectively, I think, be quite a sensible compromise between the current situation and full-blown NATO membership.
Kate, we've heard for some time that Putin might want to extend this war, and Russia's now being blamed for tensions in Moldova. What's been happening there?
This is a really interesting FT front cover going into Monday because you have one country bordering Ukraine, Poland, the story we just talked about. Now you have another country bordering Ukraine, Moldova, where today protests have been taking place, organized by the pro-Russia party, trying to oust or demand the resignation of what's considered to be their pro-West president, President Sandu. And some are arguing that, this is actually a plot by Russia to try to destabilize. The party in Moldova is pushing back on that, but you're seeing really different aspects to reaction, especially in the region, about this ongoing invasion of Ukraine. And it is also a reminder that the politics in the bordering countries are very, very different, and the demands that are taking place are different as well. And this all adds into the mix of a very messy situation. And there's no sign at the moment that Russia does plan to de-escalate. In fact, Ukraine has obviously been preparing for a far worse scenario in the coming months. And it is just that reminder of the support that they still need, which President Zelensky was adamant about over the weekend in Munich.
Kevin, you've got about 30 seconds. Moscow have denied these claims, but they have denied very many other things.
Well, yeah, they would say that, wouldn't they? You take what they say with a healthy dose of salt. Yeah, it just shows that the potential there for this dispute or this conflict to escalate elsewhere in the region is acute. And, it's something that the West particularly does not want it to spill out over outside Ukraine's borders. But, there is obviously, as things continue to escalate, there is always that potential, and it's something that the West obviously has to keep a very close eye on.
OK, Kevin and Kate, thank you both. We'll see you in the next hour. Thank you.